Okay, so this is the first actual episode of the movie show. It's a podcast I'm now doing, and with special guests on it from time to time, good friends, people I know in the film industry. And my first guest is one of my collaborative partners, Teo Madney, who's joining us here. So welcome, Teo.
Hi, Peter. Thanks, mate, and thank you for having me. How are you doing down in the United States of A?
Yeah, it's good. It's good, mate. It's kind of funny, it's because I've been in a few different states. I've been in California. I've been in Hawaii. I've just come back from a couple of weeks in Miami. And I mean, in this, unusual time we're living, each of those states, it's almost like entering a different country because they have such different rules and regulations. What's allowed in one place, is frowned upon in another. And then you go to another place and, it's a totally different set of rules. So, yeah, it's a super
It's
interesting
crazy.
time. Yeah. So I thought what we'd do just to start off with is we might just go kind of back into your background a bit and work forward to, talk a little bit about what you're doing in film and what you have done. So do you want to take us back to kind of your upbringing and what we're probably interested in is what your background is, what your influences have been, and some interesting moments on that journey for you. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Well, second generation migrants. You know, Dad came in late 1960s. You
Yep.
know, from Pakistan as a doctor. There was a shortage of doctors at that time in
Yep.
Australia. So that's where he came. And my mother was a professor of Persian language
Okay.
per se, you know. So I suppose the sort of art side or the writing side or that comes from her, you
Yeah.
know. I think in a typical traditional sort of subcontinent family, I always was more attracted towards. There were two loves I had. One was footy, which you already know,
Yep.
right? Which was this whole exposure to rugby league, and I just absolutely fell in love with it because. And then the second thing was filmmaking, um, and as we all do as we grow up, as opposed to what so growing up in the 80s in the western suburbs of Penrith and that whole era, filmmaking was so not exposed.
Yeah, right.
It was literally like winning a lotto.
Okay.
So it was literally like if someone, I remember in those times, if someone got a gig on Home and Away, he was like,
Yeah.
it was like the biggest thing. It was like someone had won an Oscar back then,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was just huge, so no one ever knew. And I'd always, my interest was always there, whether it was plays or whether it was reading and I attempted everything, whether it was acting or whether it was writing, and then slowly worked my way into the producing side of things.
Yeah.
So storytelling was always something which I loved. I could always communicate. I could always, talk about stories. So that's where the journey sort of started of
Okay.
the interest towards, filmmaking or,
And,
interest towards, yeah.
yeah. And so was that while you're at school or did you go to university and study it? Like what happened in those kind of formative years there?
Yeah. No, I mean, it literally started from school, like from, primary school, right?
Yeah.
There was nothing, zilch in terms of any formal education towards learning the craft of, because back in those days, yeah, my parents supported me, but back in those days, it was just so, the most you would do is you would actually give a punt at NIDA,
Yeah.
right? The National Institute of Dramatic Arts of Australia, So parents would say, okay, you know what, if he's got talent, let him just try for NIDA. Now, we all know the chances of making it in NIDA are
Pretty
yeah,
slim.
it's not. Yeah, exactly. So once that would finish, it would be like, okay, well, you better go out there and get a job and, get into uni and, and
Get a
do
real
a little, get a real job and,
yeah.
so it is something that you just work on the side. You privately just work towards,
Yeah.
So I just kept on writing. and then kept on trying to meet people as school finished and got, post 20s in unis, just kept on writing and meeting people and keeping that whole thing alive, keeping that whole, but also understood that it requires a lot of work, because at every step you would find something new. Like you would actually find out, well, it's not that easy, and the first sort of like my real exposure to it was I got picked for a TV series called The Heartbreak High at that time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah, it was back in, like, I'm talking about the 90s. We're into 90s now,
Okay.
And back then they used to have, this 50-worder where you were not the lead or the support, but you'd come in and say a few lines here and there,
Right.
So I did that, and it was fun. And that's when I realized, I said, okay, well, actors are in demand, but who runs the show here?
Yeah.
Who can, and that's when I found out, well, if you produce, then you can choose the actors, you can choose the directors, and I said, okay, well, maybe that is something which I want to get into.
Okay, cool. And then, so you're working on your own projects, you're writing, you're doing, some acting, the 50-worders, that kind of stuff. And then where did it all sort of feel like it started coming together? And, where did you land your first, like, not necessarily full-time job, but what was the next kind of stepping stone into producing for you?
Yeah, well, the first exposure I really, that I decided to take this very seriously and start going aggressively at it, was that I had randomly written a screenplay.
Yeah.
Right. And I had a Bollywood actor who's a friend. Yeah. Right. And I just shared it with him. Literally just shared it with him abroad. It was an English screenplay, nothing to do with Bollywood, but it was for English screenplay. And I said, geez, you'd be so good at this lead character. And he said to me, I would love to do this. The moment he said that, I was getting calls, and I think I was, I don't know, early to mid 20s, I was just married, and I was getting calls from studios in India, wanting to put development funding, up to $500,600,000 back, in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Money.
I was just like, okay, what has just happened here? And I just realized the power of these commercial actors, what they can do. And we got some funding to actually develop the project. So that was the first actual time. Then I said, okay, you know what, I've got to look at this seriously a bit more, I need to learn. And after that, then I teamed up with the partner of mine, who's also a producer, he's produced films, some good stuff. And we both teamed up. And we said, we need to travel and learn the art of this, whether it's film festivals, whether it's sales agents, and find out how do you go from A to Z, So around 2007, 6, 7, we did that, and where, as you asked, the real break came from was we were in LA, and there was an event which we were invited to by one of our executive producer partners, and we met a very well-reputed producer by the name of Edward Pressman, and he had done movies like Conan the Barbarian, American Psycho.
Wow.
You name it, and he's done it, and that is where he basically said to us, well, looks like I've got a certain subject that might interest you boys.
Yep.
It's based on a book, and it's called The Man in Infinity. Why don't you help me produce it with me, right? Yeah. So you can imagine having to produce anything at that time, and you come across this, quite huge producer, right? And so that was the first time where we thought, okay, so naturally we celebrated that night thinking we had made it, until the next morning we had to get on a call with his lawyer, in which he says, okay, boys, welcome on board. You need to raise $10 million.
Yeah, right. Party's over.
Party's over.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I got into it.
Okay, and then The Man Who Knew Infinity, that's the film with Jeremy Irons, isn't it?
Yeah, The Man Who Knew Infinity is based on a book called The Man Who Knew Infinity.
Yep.
It was quite a bestseller. It had a lot of other well-reputed producers attached in the past.
Yeah.
And somehow it just wouldn't get over the line.
Right.
Okay. Right. And we had always discussed, myself, I had always discussed that somehow getting the East and West to collaborate.
Right.
Somehow. Okay. Is the future. It is going to happen.
Yes.
Because the world was expanding, the migration was expanding.
Yeah.
If you've got, migrants and people of different ethnic backgrounds throughout the global world, where you're not only, so that is a ticket price. That is what they want to buy,
Mm-hmm.
That's when we basically took it on and we went on our journey of bringing on some finance, to get it to that next step, of actually being in a position to fix the script, get the options happening, and also then, eventually being in a stage where we could go and try to sell it off or even make offers to, at that time it was Jeremy, okay, put yourself,
Stepping into that a little bit there. So you've met this producer who's obviously a very reputable producer. He's done some great projects. They're looking at a very well-known leading man in the role there. You guys have had a night of partying, woke up, and you've had this realization that the party's over. Now we've got to get to work and raise the money. So how much did you have to raise initially to start development, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah. Well, the initial we had to raise was literally about $500,000.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That would include. So the first step was that would include being in a position to fix the script, right? Which was already work in progress by the director,
so
and that was all.
You brought a script doctor in, did you?
Yeah, we had to. Yeah. So you whether it's a script editors, whether it's script doctors, but do keep in mind that once you are raising finance, you usually, so we started to approach from the subcontinent side people who were part of the film world.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
the first thing they do is, because they are used to financing, so they read the script, right? Yeah. And they would give their feedback, Right. So a few things were happening parallel, whether it was sales agents reading and giving feedback on the screenplay, whether it was the investors that we were trying to raise money from giving feedback, and then that would eventually go to the creative team led by the director, and then he would work on either addressing it, getting notes, but your first step is, getting script editors on board,
Okay. A
total outside view,
It's quite interesting, isn't it? The filmmaking process is that there's like the art of making the film, which starts with getting the script right, but there's also an art to the funding side of it as well. It's not a science so much. So were you at that time? Were you going back to your contacts in Bollywood to get some capital raising there, or were you in America looking for money, or where did that initial piece of money come from?
Well, the initial came from India.
Okay.
Was the initial investment.
Yeah.
And it came, I decided to pack my bags around 2011. And I spoke to my same actor friend from India, who had earlier helped develop one of my projects. And he said to me that you need to come and live in the jungle.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. He goes, by making your phone calls from there and speaking and trying, it's not going to happen, right? He says, you got to come here, mix with the locals, live in the jungle, and the trust factor of the investors and understanding their psyche and how it works over here.
Yeah.
Which is funny because usually the way how you and we work is it's a very standard sort of a procedure where you identify an investor, he asks for a finance plan, and he asks for the return, and then you send the documents no matter which part of the world it is, and you have a few phone calls. It's simple.
That's right. Yeah.
A bit more heart and emotions from the side that we were looking to raise funds from.
Yeah, okay.
So I went there. I stayed there for about a year, and within less than a year, I was lucky to come across another producer, financier, and she was along the same sort of mindset as I was, of doing, trying to take the whole subcontinent and India side into a new direction of filmmaking.
Okay.
All right.
You're in Mumbai for a year?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which, I mean, I haven't actually been to Mumbai, but I've been to a lot of the big cities in India, and they are very frenetic places, aren't they?
Oh, it's crazy. It's insane. And it's funny. Mumbai is it's like LA. So any cafe, restaurant, or place you go to, you will overhear conversations about only one thing: filmmaking.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Each table will claim to have the biggest star in the place.
Yeah. I mean,
India. It's crazy.
India in itself is very interesting, isn't it? It's kind of like one day you'll wake up and you're thinking, I couldn't be in a worse place in the world. And the next day you wake up and you just think you're so blessed having this magical experience in this magical place.
Yeah. You go through that, right? And it was tough because my whole family was back, home. And it was really tough, So I was juggling between how do I still catch up on footy to keep my insanity, and how do I still raise funds over here and develop contacts and all that. And you are right, because you would literally sleep one night thinking, geez, we live in the best place, and like, how do people survive here? You know?
Yeah.
And then the next day thinking, my God, this is the most beautiful place, right? Diversity, people, you can conquer the world. You can do whatever you want,
My own experience of India too was that there was very few middle emotions. It was either like ecstasy or depression. It was like nothing in the middle. It was because it's just so much going on and it's such a full-on place.
Yeah, you get overwhelmed. You really do. Because
it's a culture shock like no other.
It's because on one side you are literally you are driving in a nice luxury car.
Yeah.
And then on the other side you're looking on the road and you're seeing reality.
Yeah. No, it's so
right.
So coming back to The Man Who Knew Infinity, so you've raised that $500,000. You've got the script worked on. What was the next step in that process? And, what was that meaning for you in your own career as well?
Yeah, it was funny, things were happening because we tried for a good 2-3 years. And then eventually, we got our first investment of, the $500,000.
Yeah.
And then things started to happen so quickly that you forget about the celebration times.
Right.
When we are getting into a field, whichever field it is, whether, whatever field we do as people, you always think, when I achieve that, I'm going to celebrate it to the best way. Right. Yeah. But all these little landmarks were being achieved. But by the time we would get to that, we were worried about the next.
Yeah.
So you would actually not be like, I would have thought, my God, the first time I'll be able to raise $500,000 and attach an actor and be off to Cannes to sell it is like, done it, But far from it, from it, it was, so that was the thing. And then we were off to Cannes and other film festivals, to bring on the best sort of sales agent, right? And then obviously, naturally at that time, I was with some bigwigs, of the producers. It was more learning.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay, how do you talk to sales agents?
So
How,
so it sounds like what you were doing in that period, you're working on raising the money for the man who knew infinity, but you're also sort of doing your apprenticeship at that same time as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you got to learn because, raising money is just half the battle,
Yeah.
right? How it's spent, where it's spent, what's the next process. It's so critical. And that we had heard about, read about, but to now experience it was another thing,
Yeah. Sure.
Uh,
Sure.
yeah,
And what do you,
sales figures, yeah.
yeah, what do you think, like that there of, getting the money in and learning how to spend it, what were the other lessons you learned there that have helped you, expand and get bigger today?
I think you mean in terms of when we had already raised the money, or the whole
Yeah.
process of raising?
Or both. So like raising money, what are the real, like the key lessons you learnt there? And then even when you got the money, what were the key lessons you learnt there other than managing the money?
Yeah. To be honest with you, what I found was honesty was the
Yeah.
best lesson I learned.
Yeah.
Okay. The more honest you are when you're raising funds,
Yeah.
when you are reading a script, or when you're discussing, it just breaks the ice.
Yeah. Yeah.
The moment anyone that you're trying to do business with, and they can sense that, okay, is he selling hard here?
Yeah.
Right? And that I just found that I'd always found that the more honest I was, even when we were raising the first lot of money,
Yeah.
if the question was asked, what's the guarantee? Right? Now, your standard producers at that time, I'm not sure about now, but I'm pretty sure they still exist, would say, 100% guarantee.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to blitz the world.
Yeah.
And you're going to, make millions and hundreds and millions. My response used to be, is there's no guarantee, but I can guarantee you is that every single cent of that will be spent on reducing and minimizing your risk.
Yeah. Okay.
And that literally was it,
Yeah.
that was it. And I would say that, if you want guarantee, then here's Peter's number, and he'll tell you about property.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always found it one of your finest qualities is that you're super honest, you're super transparent. And I mean, we've talked, I think, recently about some investors you've been dealing with in New York and how they really like dealing with you because they know whether it's good or bad, they are going to get the truth from you.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes the journey so much easier for both the parties, Peter, and you've been in business, man. You've achieved amazing stuff in business. You've been doing it for also, that once you enter into a business, it's a relationship. It's not a one night stand.
Yeah.
Right. So just to lie and just to get into bed for one night and the next morning think, okay, what have I done here? Right. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. So the more honest you are, because the other person is also a human being. He thinks like you.
Yeah.
And the moment he thinks that, okay, well, he's giving it and that's always work. It's small, it's amazing how that works in whether it's finances, investors, actors, agents, actors, production. It just works.
Yeah. It kind of is. The more honest, the less effort that's needed.
Yeah, because you don't have to keep on lying. You don't have to keep on making stuff up, Like when you're honest and you're transparent where they know, okay, well, no, he had told me it'll take time, and if someone new would come and say, what is one thing I can learn while investing with you? Yeah. And my thing would be that if you want to be in the entertainment business, learn patience.
Yeah. There's that.
That's it. Yeah.
There's that mantra that a lot of film people use, which is hurry up and wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's patience because it's not in your hand. It's art.
Yeah.
Right. At what point does someone like it? How they like it? How they react to it? Especially when you're an independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the your well-established studio where the funds are there and you have a process and yep, green light production.
Sure.
When you're independent one, you just have to wait. It's one of those projects.
Yeah. So okay. So the Man Who Knew Infinity did very well. You guys did very well out of that. What came next after that? And was it then that you started your own company, or what was the next part of your journey there?
Yeah. So after Man Who Knew Infinity, what the best thing it did was it was being recognized as serious guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and they've got an eye to choose the right content and invest in the right content, and that was the thing that we learned. Or myself learned. Then I myself. Independently as a producer started to work on different projects which were at different stages. Because the exposure to India and LA, what that leads to you is that people have projects in certain stages, and they come to you and you literally you just think, okay, this is interesting, but always was what is interesting. It wouldn't just be jump on it because it takes a lot of effort and time to give time to it. So then it was more like assisting and helping create other projects, right? Because projects takes a good 2 to 3 years, right? Assisting and helping in that, and also starting to now look at the next project that we should develop and get into, and hence that led to then me, because by the time, imagine from 2009, 8, meeting in LA for Infinity, by the time the movie was made and released, it was 2015.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
Okay, so it was but it was the best learning experience one could get. So after that, it was just helping and assisting, whether it's movies like Hotel Mumbai that just recently came out, right? Helping with distribution or sales or investments, started my own production house, realized that, okay, the IP needs to stay with us, the intellectual property. And that's how the next step was to do that and starting to develop other projects.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, like I'm aware that there's some projects that you can't talk about. You've got some really exciting stuff happen. But what are the things that you've got going at the moment that you can talk about? What direction is your career heading to now, and your business and the growth of your company?
Yeah. Well, there's a few projects I can sort of speak to you about, which were put on hold as we all were, the first 6-7 months of 2020, So one of the first projects that we had launched under the company was a project called Yaman, Yaman came to me through a friend of mine who was basically a director and assisting with us on one of our productions while we were in India, and it's a beautiful story about a married couple and their sexuality, right? And it's a true story of this friend of ours, It was funny because it's something that I would have never thought about, but after spending time with him and understanding, it's funny when you get overthinking about your own issues and you actually just look at other people and their issues, you go, wow, that's pretty hardcore, and here is this beautiful couple who've been in love since high school, and then after marriage, the guy actually discovers, well, he's homosexual.
Yeah, right.
And that beautiful story. So we thought, okay, let's make a short film on this.
Wow.
It's such an amazing story. We made a short film on that back in 2017. And then it was nominated in plenty of festivals. It won awards and all that stuff. And then we said, okay, this needs to be made into a feature. So now that is at its final stages now, at the moment.
So final stages of like writing the script for the feature or the production?
Yeah. Yes, no. So the final stages of active conversations with sales agents, studios, because the studios also monitor projects like this. You
Okay.
know, so they, yeah, and then along the way, you end up attaching some reputable cast.
Yeah.
You end up attaching reputable people to it. So they'd already seen the short film. We raised our own investment for the screenplay.
Yeah.
We brought on an amazing, talented writer from India. She's one of the leading ones. She's done some amazing out of the box stuff, whether it's on acid victims, whether it's on feminism, some
Yeah.
amazing stuff. So she ended up writing it. And it's funny how this entertainment industry works because it all comes down to the screenplay,
Yes.
right? Okay. And the moment they start to hear that these people are writing something, okay,
Yeah.
they want a piece of it or they want to read it. Yeah. So you might approach a studio or an investor and you say, hey, we've got something new. They'll say, oh, that's cool. We'll look at that. But I heard you're working on this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the first project, Peter, that will go into production at the end of this year.
Yep.
It is basically a love story between a gay man and his wife.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting story, isn't it?
That's probably the best way I can sum it up.
Yeah.
So that's one project we are doing.
That sounds like a great tagline, doesn't it? A love story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When people ask us or when we are speaking with, our collaborators or studios, if they ask, sum it up, so the director sums it up in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
Because this is it.
That's awesome. And then, obviously, like we're working on a project together. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah. So I think we had discussed working on a project for some time,
Yeah, we've dabbled in a few different things, haven't we?
Yeah, but we could never, and I think it was that phase where we were also trying to, assist other people with their projects.
Right.
And say, okay, well, let's help them with that. But you and I were always looking for something that we could do together, and it's funny how we both love the game of rugby, and how our conversation started, regarding rugby. So that's an amazing project, which you're a producer of as well.
Yep.
It's about athletes that can come from any different sports. Yep. But our season 1 is based on rugby league, where we are more interested in not speaking to the good boys, the teachers' favorites, as you would say, because we know what they've done. We are more interested in the dark horses.
Yeah.
We're more exactly. So it's a story about them. So the background is rugby or sports, but it's got nothing to do with that. It's about these individuals as athletes. Who are they? We just hear about them. We know about them. We see them. And like we said, we love them on Friday and we hate them on Monday.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And everyone seems to know these people and we judge them. But this particular series titled Me is more about, let's find out who they are. Why did they take those decisions? Where are they headed? What's their background? And some very colorful, interesting characters. And it's amazing the small things you find out because you speak to them and you might think, one of the athletes which I was discussing with you speak to them and you think, what was your highlight? And you're thinking of he'll talk about some play that he did, right? And he'll say, taking mum to Europe for a week's holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that probably one of the great things about this series we're making as well, and I think it, I've been thinking about a bit, and probably some of the influences that you've had in your childhood growing up in the western suburbs of Sydney, which is, it's a pretty tough environment to grow up in particularly back then. And particularly for a non-white Australian to grow up in that kind of environment. And what I like about what we're creating with this, and I think you've been the driving force in a fair bit of this, is you're kind of giving a voice to people who've been misrepresented somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's funny how they think it's like having two outsiders.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at black or white, for example, okay, each one does want to come together, but each one thinks they're okay, well, each one is so obsessed with their own issues, right?
Yeah.
And I found through rugby was that was one platform where people from all backgrounds could come and be part of.
Yeah, right.
And that just gives them such confidence to, like you said, when I was growing up here, it was like, okay, well, when I do walk in as a kid, I am the only different one.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
But it's funny how getting into playing the game, right? Yeah. And especially back then, which I had mentioned to you, we would go to the rugby games and I could hear people saying Imran, or I could hear people saying, this is not, wrong game, mate, whatever, right? This is not cricket or,
Yeah.
But it's funny the moment you jump on and you start playing that, that finishes.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I found in my case.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then you all of a sudden became a player with them. Okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, no, he's good at that, mate. Put him on this side because we could just do it. It's funny how that started the ball rolling,
right. Yeah.
And it just gave me such confidence that I think, I probably would have been the loudest dark black Asian guy in Penrith.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It was more like the locals would say, oh shit, he's coming, he's going to hammer us, or he's going to say something. It's such confidence it gives you because you see it.
Yeah.
You see it like, you play with them, you're hitting them, you're physical, you select. So that just goes off field as well and gets inside you, Yeah. So that's how it helped me. And the same thing I see with this series that we're doing, with people, whether they're indigenous, whether they're Torres Strait. What I'm also seeing is that the shy kids, like lost, from the bush or whatever, geez, how that gives them the confidence and how it turns them around to have a voice and be leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
It's a very interesting one.
Yeah. So, I mean, other than that one, let's just, and we'll kind of wrap up pretty shortly. Last thing I wanted to kind of ask you was project yourself forward 5 years. Where would you like to be sitting personally in 5 years? Like, what would you like your accomplishments to have been? What are the projects you'd like to have completed in that kind of period?
Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, what I would love is, and this was always what we as a company, Pictureworks Australia, started out to be, was that in 5 to 7 years, be totally independent filmmaking niche production house.
Yeah.
But you tell stories which are not just Australian.
Right.
You are telling stories which can be from the most remote part of any part of the world.
Yeah.
Because now is that time, So to be able to tell stories, whether it is from a small village in Pakistan, whether you are telling a story from Europe or Africa, you should be able to just finance and tell that story. And the second most important thing is what we missed out, or what I missed out on, guidance and mentors.
Oh, wow.
Is to make sure, and we do that already, is that we never say no to any young filmmakers.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome.
Right? They can approach us. They can sit with our writing sessions, because we were so lost when we came out. We just didn't know where to look. And the next thing is that the local talent we've got within Australia, directors, filmmakers, actors, do your best to support them. Okay? Because it's a jungle out there. Get them involved, because a creative person sitting at home is suicidal.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very frightening for them, but just make them feel, listen to their ideas. So in 5 years' time is to be self-sufficient, where we are financing our own projects. And also we are working with new talent.
Awesome.
is what telling those stories.
So then, I mean, just probably final question before we wrap up is, how can people reach out to you? Do you want them maybe to contact me through the show here, or do you want to give some of your details, or should they go to your website? How should, an aspiring...
I mean, they can just go to our website, mate. They can reach out to you.
What's the web address?
Yeah, it's just, your www.pwaustralia.com.au,
pwaustralia.com.au.
That's it, they can send info@pwaustralia.com.au, they can reach out to you, anything they send that, I will be reading it.
Okay, cool.
So it does not just go into anything which is junk. We are working with, recently we're working with graduates, we're working with NIDA students, we're working with just kids who want to get into it. We get them involved, so yeah, absolutely, man, they can reach out.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's funny, interesting, just before we started this actual podcast, is we were speaking about somebody that I knew who you may be able to help, break into an acting role. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like, exactly. Yeah. And that's how it works. Just like yourself. I mean, there's been so many times where I've spoken to you and you've put me in a direction and you said, T, that's it, man. I think it's just, absolutely, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure. Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. And,
anytime, mate.
Many good days ahead.
Definitely. And hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, cheers. Might be a couple more months yet.
Or just come back by the start of the footy season at least, mate. We catch a few games.
Yeah, we'll do, mate.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheerio.